The massive ship, called Harmony of Stars, drifted through space like a floating city. Its hull stretched for miles in every direction and housed the most important military school in the galaxy. Students from 17 different star systems came, here to learn the art of war from the best teachers in known space. Commander Zixtel walked through the crystal corridors with measured steps. His skin shifted from deep blue to pale green as he thought about the day ahead. The Alterian had taught war strategy for over 200 years and had seen students from every corner of the galaxy. Today would bring something new. The first human student was arriving. Zixtal had read the files 3 times. Jake Morrison from the 3rd planet of the Sol system had scored higher on the Galactic Strategic Aptitude test than any student in Academy history. The numbers seemed impossible. No species had ever achieved such results on their first attempt. The docking bay filled with curious students as the transport ship landed. Frex the Korthik stood near the entrance, his scaled hide gleaming under the bright lights. The reptilian warrior had spent 5 years studying traditional battle tactics and considered himself an expert. Next to him, Nissa floated gracefully, her translucent void-born form shimmering like captured starlight. She approached, warfare as an art form, believing that battles should be beautiful as well as effective. Grok the Stoneheart towered over everyone else. The massive rock-like being believed that true warriors settled disputes through single combat between champions. Honor meant everything to his people. The transport door opened with a soft hiss. Jake Morrison stepped out carrying a single bag. Over his shoulder and wearing a worn cap with strange symbols on it. He looked around the docking bay with bright eyes and grinned widely. "Wow, this place is huge," Jake said to no one in particular. "It's like being inside a space station from one of those games back home." The alien students exchanged confused looks. Games? What did recreational activities have to do with the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy? Zixtal approached, the human with formal dignity. "Welcome to Harmony of Stars, Student Morrison. I am Commander Zixtal, your primary instructor in advanced battle tactics." Jake stuck out his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Hey there, Commander. Just call me Jake. This is going to be awesome." The casual tone made Zixtal's skin flash orange with surprise. Students usually addressed their instructors with proper respect and ceremony. This human acted like he was meeting a friend instead of one of the galaxy's most respected war teachers. The first class began an hour later in the main strategy chamber. Holographic displays showed star maps and fleet positions while students took their places at learning stations. Jake sat between Vrex and Nissa, still looking around with obvious excitement. "Today we will examine the Battle of Kepler Station," Zixtal announced as the displays changed to show a complex scenario. This historical engagement involved 3 different fleets, civilian evacuations, and limited resources. You have 4 hours to develop a complete battle plan following standard galactic warfare protocols. The other students immediately began studying the situation with serious concentration. They pulled up reference materials about fleet movements, supply calculations, and diplomatic considerations. War was serious business that required careful thought and proper respect for all life forms involved. Jake looked at the display for about 5 minutes, then started sketching on his personal tablet, while his classmates worked through complex mathematical formulas and historical precedents. He drew simple diagrams and made notes using words that no one else understood. After 20 minutes, Jake raised his hand. "Already finished?" Zixtal asked with surprise that turned his skin bright. "Yellow." "Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward," Jake replied. "You just need to control the high ground and cut off their supply routes. See, if you pull back your main force here and make them think you're retreating, they'll overextend to chase you. Then you hit their supply ships with fast attack craft while they're committed to the pursuit. Once their logistics are broken, you can pick them off piece by piece. The classroom fell silent. Vrex stared at the human with his large reptilian eyes. Nissa's ethereal form flickered with confusion. Even Massive Grok seemed puzzled by such. A rapid solution. Student Morrison, Zixtel said carefully. This scenario took the original commanders 6 months to resolve. The Battle of Kepler Station was one of the longest sieges in galactic history. Jake shrugged. Well, yeah, if you follow all the traditional rules and try to minimize casualties on both sides. But if you just focus on winning efficiently, it's basically like that level in Stellar Command, where you have to defend the space station while managing 3 different resource streams. The trick is to make the enemy commit to bad positions and then exploit their mistakes. Stellar Command? Nissa asked in her musical voice. It's a strategy game from Earth, really popular back home. I probably played through scenarios like this 1,000 times. Jake pointed at his tablet. The setup is almost identical. You've got the defensive position, limited reinforcements, and an enemy that's stronger but overconfident. Classic tower defense with some real-time strategy elements. The alien students looked even more confused. Games? This human was comparing a serious historical battle to recreational activities? The very idea seemed almost insulting to the memory of those who had fought and died at Kepler Station. Zixtel felt his skin cycling through several colors as he tried to process what he was hearing. Student Morrison, warfare is not a game. Real lives are at stake in every decision a commander makes. The responsibility requires careful consideration of all factors. Oh, sure, I get that, Jake said cheerfully. But thinking of it like a game helps you see all the possible moves without getting bogged down in unnecessary details. Like emotional attachment to specific units can make you miss better strategic options. You have to think objectively about the win conditions. Win conditions? Vrex hissed through his sharp teeth. Yeah, what you need to accomplish to claim victory. In this scenario, the win condition is keeping the station operational and driving off the attackers. Everything else is just details about how you get there. The discussion continued for the rest of the class period, with Jake explaining his unconventional approach while his classmates and instructor struggled to understand his perspective. By the time the session ended, word had already begun spreading through the academy about the strange human who treated warfare like entertainment. That evening, Zixtel sat in his private quarters reviewing Jake's solution to the Kepler station. Scenario. Despite the human's casual attitude and strange terminology, the tactical plan was actually quite brilliant. It showed creative thinking and strategic insight that impressed even the experienced commander. But something about Jake's approach troubled him deeply. The human seemed to lack the proper gravity that warfare demanded. How could someone be so skilled at strategy while treating such serious matters so lightly? Zixtal's skin settled into a worried purple hue as he realized that tomorrow's classes would bring even more challenges from their unusual new student. 3 weeks into the semester, Jake Morrison had become the most talked-about student in the history of Harmony of Stars. Every class brought new confusion as the human approached. Military scenarios with methods that baffled his instructors and amazed his fellow students. In Fleet Command class, Professor Kethvara presented a massive space battle simulation involving dozens of capital ships and hundreds of smaller vessels. The scenario required students to coordinate multiple fleet groups while protecting civilian transports and maintaining supply lines across 3 star systems. Most students spent hours calculating fuel consumption rates, crew rotation schedules, and optimal formation patterns. They studied historical examples and consulted tactical manuals that had guided galactic warfare for centuries. The simulation was designed to take several days to complete properly. Jake finished in 6 hours. How did you coordinate so many units so quickly? Asked Nex, a crystalline being whose species was famous for their mathematical precision. Jake scratched his head under his ever-present baseball cap. It's just like managing multiple control groups in a real-time strategy game. You set up your macro first, get your resource production running smoothly, then focus on micromanaging the important battles while letting the AI handle routine stuff. AI? Professor Kethvara's tentacles twitched with confusion. Oh, sorry. Artificial intelligence. Computer assistance. You guys have that here, right? Jake pointed at the simulation controls. Your fleet management systems can handle basic formation flying and supply runs automatically. You just need to give them general orders and focus on the big picture decisions. The professor's skin changed to a deep orange color that indicated extreme bewilderment. Student Morrison, fleet commanders are expected to personally oversee all aspects of their operations. Delegating important decisions to mechanical systems shows lack of proper command responsibility. But that's incredibly inefficient. Jake protested. Why would you waste brainpower on stuff the computer can do better? That's like trying to calculate hyperspace jumps by hand instead of using navigation systems. The whole point of having good tools is to use them so you can focus on strategy instead of busywork. The debate that followed became legendary throughout the Academy. Jake's approach to fleet command treated the massive simulation like what he called a massive multiplayer online strategy game where players controlled hundreds or thousands of units simultaneously. His casual references to unit production, resource management, and build orders made perfect sense to him, but sounded like alien language to everyone else. The real shock came during Advanced Planetary Defense class with Professor Yelandra. The scenario involved protecting a peaceful farming world from pirate raiders while minimizing damage to civilian infrastructure and avoiding unnecessary casualties among the attackers. Traditional galactic warfare emphasized honor, proportional response, and protection of all sentient life. Students were expected to develop elegant solutions that resolved conflicts with minimal violence while maintaining moral superiority. Jake's solution involved evacuating all civilians to underground shelters, then turning the entire planet's surface into an elaborate trap network. He proposed using the farming equipment as improvised weapons, the irrigation systems as movement channels for defensive forces, and the grain silos as observation posts and supply depots. Student Morrison, Professor Yelandra said, her ethereal form flickering with distress. You have essentially transformed a peaceful agricultural world into a military fortress. This violates every principle of proportional defense. Not really, Jake replied with his usual cheerful tone. The civilians are safe underground. The planet infrastructure stays mostly intact, and the pirates get caught in a situation where surrender is their best option. It's basically a non-lethal area denial strategy with multiple fallback positions. Area denial strategy? Yeah, you make it really expensive and annoying for the enemy to stay in your territory. Like spawn camping, but in reverse. Instead of preventing them from respawning, you make them not want to be there in the first place. Frex leaned forward with interest. The Korthic warrior had been studying Jake's methods and found them surprisingly effective, even if the terminology was strange. How do you ensure the pirates choose surrender over continued attack? Jake grinned and pulled up his tactical display. Easy. You give them a series of increasingly frustrating encounters that make it clear they're outmatched. But you also leave obvious escape routes that lead them exactly where you want them to go. It's like level design in a puzzle game. You guide player behavior by making certain choices obviously better than others. The class spent the rest of the period trying to understand Jake's explanation of player psychology and behavioral prediction. Modeling. His approach treated the enemy pirates like players in a game who would make predictable choices. based on risk-reward calculations rather than honor-bound warriors following ancient codes of conduct. Word of Jake's unconventional methods reached the Academy's senior faculty. Commander Zixtal found himself called to emergency meetings where professors from across the galaxy shared their concerns about the human students' impact on traditional military education. He treats every simulation like entertainment, complained Professor Dorn Thick, whose species had fought honorable wars for thousands of years. There is no respect for the gravity of command decisions or the weight of responsibility that comes with military leadership. Yet his results are undeniably effective, pointed out Professor Quellix, an ancient being whose people had survived countless conflicts through careful strategic thinking. Perhaps we should examine why his methods work so well. The debate split the faculty. Some saw Jake as a dangerous influence who could corrupt the Academy's traditional values. Others recognized that his fresh perspective might offer solutions to military problems that had puzzled galactic strategists for generations. Meanwhile, Jake remained completely unaware of the controversy he was causing. He approached each new simulation with genuine enthusiasm, treating complex military scenarios like challenging puzzles to be solved efficiently. His casual attitude toward warfare continued to shock his alien classmates, but his consistent success was becoming impossible. To ignore the breaking point came during the semester's major examination. Students were presented with a sector-wide conflict involving multiple species, competing resource claims, and complex political considerations. The simulation was designed to run for an entire month, with students working in teams to develop comprehensive long-term strategies. Jake spent the first day studying the scenario, making notes about what he called faction balance and victory conditions. While other students began forming careful alliances based on traditional diplomatic protocols, Jake started treating the entire situation like what he called a massive multiplayer diplomacy game with real-time combat elements. His approach involved temporary partnerships that he abandoned when strategically advantageous, resource trading that somehow always left him with better deals, and military tactics that technically followed the rules while completely violating their spirit. He convinced other students to make decisions that served his long-term plans while appearing to benefit their own short-term goals. The most shocking moment came when Jake managed to convince half of the enemy faction to switch sides by offering them better strategic positions in his growing alliance. He accomplished this not through traditional diplomatic negotiations, but through what he called metagaming the political system. I just showed them that cooperation with my faction gave better reward structures than continuing to fight, Jake explained to his stunned instructors. It's basic game theory applied to conflict resolution. The simulation that was supposed to last a month ended in 3 weeks, with Jake's faction controlling most of the sector through a combination of military victory and diplomatic manipulation. No traditional military academy had ever seen anything like it. Professor Yelendra floated in her office afterward, her form dim with exhaustion and confusion. The human student had achieved total strategic victory while treating the entire exercise like recreational entertainment. His methods worked brilliantly, but they challenged everything she had believed about the nature of warfare and military leadership. That night, emergency faculty meetings continued late into the station's sleep cycle as the Academy's greatest military minds struggled to understand what Jake Morrison's success meant for the future of galactic warfare. The emergency faculty meeting took place in the Academy's highest security conference room. Representatives from every major species in the Galactic Alliance gathered around the massive circular table, their various forms of communication creating a complex harmony of sounds, colors, and energy patterns. Commander Zixtal's crystalline skin shifted through worried blues and purples as he called the meeting to order. Colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation. Student Morrison's methods challenge everything we have taught by proper military conduct. Yet his results cannot be disputed. Professor Yelandra's ethereal form flickered with distress. Human approaches warfare as if it were recreational activity. He shows no proper respect for the gravity of command decisions or the lives that hang in the balance. But his tactical solutions work, rumbled Grok's professor, a massive stone art named Torgrim. His unconventional approaches achieve victory, with fewer casualties than traditional methods. Is this not what we ultimately desire? The debate that followed revealed deep philosophical divisions among the galaxy's greatest military educators. Some species valued honor and tradition above efficiency, while others prioritized results over methods. The human student had somehow found approaches that worked better than anything they had seen before, but his casual attitude toward warfare troubled many of the instructors. Professor Quallix, the ancient scholar whose species had survived countless wars, raised a gnarled appendage for attention. Perhaps we should investigate this human gaming culture more thoroughly before we make judgments. I have been researching their homeworld's information networks. The professor activated a holographic display that showed data collected from Earth's communication systems. Images appeared of humans engaged in various recreational activities that involved strategic thinking, resource management, and simulated combat. Fascinating, whispered Professor Kethvara, as the display showed humans spending hours engaged in complex strategic simulations. They voluntarily practice warfare scenarios during their leisure time? Not just practice, Quallix explained. They have turned strategic thinking into entertainment. Millions of humans regularly engage in activities that simulate everything from individual combat to galaxy-spanning conflicts. They treat these simulations as challenges to be mastered through repeated practice and constant improvement. The assembled faculty stared in amazement at recordings of human gaming tournaments, where thousands of spectators watch competitors engage in strategic battles, using rules and scenarios that would be familiar to any military academy. The humans approach these contests with intense focus and dedication, but also with obvious enjoyment. They have gamified warfare, Zixtal realized, his skin shifting to bright yellow with understanding. What we consider serious life or death. Decisions they have transformed into recreational challenges to be solved efficiently. Look at this, Quallix continued, showing footage of human children playing strategic games. They begin learning tactical thinking at an early age, but without the emotional weight that our species associate with military training. By the time they reach adulthood, they have internalized strategic concepts that take our students years to master. Professor Dornthak, whose people had fought honorable wars for millennia, expressed obvious distress. This explains the human's casual attitude towards sacred military traditions. To him, war is just another game to be won through clever rule exploitation. But consider the implications, argued Professor Yelandra, her form brightening with sudden insight. If humans can learn strategic thinking without the psychological barriers that limit other species, they might achieve levels of tactical innovation that we cannot match. The meeting was interrupted by the arrival of another human student, Lisa. Parker had just completed the transfer process from Earth's military academy and was scheduled to join Jake's classes. The faculty decided to observe her initial interactions to better understand human military culture. Lisa met Jake in the academy's central plaza, where students from dozens of species gathered between classes. Their conversation was recorded and later analyzed by xenolinguistics experts trying to understand human military terminology. "Hey Jake, how's the new school treating you?" Lisa asked as she looked around at the impressive alien architecture. "It's pretty awesome," Jake replied, with his usual enthusiasm. "The simulation systems here are incredible, and the AI is way more sophisticated than anything back home. The only weird thing is how seriously everyone takes everything. Like, they act like every practice scenario is life or death." Yeah, I noticed that during orientation, the instructors seem really uptight about following proper procedures and maintaining honor codes. It's like they've never heard of min-maxing or exploiting game mechanics. The listening faculty members exchanged confused glances. Min-maxing? Game mechanics? These terms meant nothing to them, but the humans spoke as if they were fundamental concepts. Have you tried explaining speed-running strategies to them? Lisa continued. Some of these historical scenarios they keep referencing could probably be solved in a fraction of the time if you just ignore the unnecessary objectives and focus on optimal completion paths. I've been trying, but they don't seem to get it. Jake said with a slight frown. They keep talking about honor and proper military conduct, like those things are more important than actually winning efficiently. It's like they're playing on some weird difficulty setting where you get extra points for making things harder on yourself. Professor Zixtal found his skin cycling rapidly through multiple colors as he tried to process this conversation. Humans were discussing military strategy using terminology that suggested they viewed warfare as a form of entertainment with arbitrary rules and scoring systems. Later that day, the faculty decided to test their theories by presenting both humans with a carefully designed scenario. They created a simulation based on the historical siege of Kethmora, a conflict that had taken the original participants 2 years to resolve through careful diplomatic negotiations and limited military actions. Jake and Lisa approached the scenario like they were planning to tackle a challenging cooperative game. They spent 15 minutes discussing what they called the optimal strategy path and identified what Lisa termed several obvious exploits in the scenario design. Their solution involved abandoning the besieged city temporarily to draw enemy forces into overextension, then using rapid strike forces to capture the enemy's home territory while their main army was committed to the siege. The plan required precise timing and coordination, but it promised to resolve the entire conflict in weeks rather than years. You are suggesting we abandon the civilians in Kethmora to enemy occupation? Professor Yilandra asked with horror. Only temporarily, Lisa explained patiently. The enemy can't actually harm the civilian population without turning the other neutral factions against them. It's a basic diplomatic mechanics exploit. They're forced to treat the civilians well to maintain their political position, which gives us time to execute the counter-strategy. Diplomatic mechanics exploit? Zixtal's skin had shifted to a confused orange color. Yeah, using the political rules against themselves, Jake added. It's like when game designers create systems that can be used in ways they didn't intend. The enemy thinks they're winning by taking the city, but they've actually trapped themselves in a position where they can't leverage their temporary advantage. The faculty spent hours trying to understand the human perspective on warfare. Gradually, they began to realize that Jake and Lisa's approach offered genuine strategic advantages. By treating warfare as a complex game with rules to be mastered and exploited, humans could develop innovative solutions without being constrained by traditional thinking. Professor Quellex made the observation that would reshape military education throughout the galaxy. Perhaps the humans had discovered something profound. By removing the emotional and cultural weight from strategic thinking, they can see possibilities that escape us. Their gaming approach allows pure tactical analysis without the limitations imposed by honor codes and traditional military doctrine. That evening, Commander Zixtal sat in his quarters reviewing recordings of the day's discussions. The human students had challenged fundamental assumptions about military education and strategic thinking. Their casual approach to warfare was disturbing, but their results suggested they might have found a superior method for developing tactical skills. As he watched Jake and Lisa discussing their strategy for the next day's simulations with obvious excitement and enjoyment, Zixtal realized that the academy would never be the same. These humans had turned the art of war into entertainment, and somehow that transformation had made them better at it than species that had been fighting for thousands of years. The implications were staggering, and Zixtal's skin settled into a deep, thoughtful purple as he considered what changes would be necessary to prepare the galaxy for the human approach to warfare. The emergency alert blared through every corridor of Harmony of Stars at 0347 Standard Galactic Time. Students and faculty rushed from their quarters as the Academy's massive communication systems received urgent transmissions from across the Outer Rim territories. Commander Zixtal's skin flashed bright red with alarm as he read the incoming reports in the command center. His crystalline surface reflected the harsh emergency lighting as more data streams poured in from distant star systems. 3 simultaneous attacks, he announced to the gathering faculty members. The hegemony has launched coordinated strikes against Altara Prime, the Korthek mining colonies, and the void-born cultural worlds. Traditional Alliance defense patterns are failing completely. Professor Yolandra's ethereal form dimmed with distress as she processed the tactical data. The enemy seems to be adapting to our standard response protocols faster than our commanders can adjust. Every conventional strategy has been countered within hours of implementation. The hegemony had been a growing threat for decades, but their recent expansion showed unprecedented tactical sophistication. Their forces moved with coordination that suggested advanced strategic planning and intelligence-gathering capabilities that exceeded Alliance estimates. Fleet Admiral Korthnax appeared via holographic projection from the Alliance High Command vessel Eternal Vigilance. The veteran commander's scarred face showed the strain of coordinating desperate defensive actions across multiple fronts. Harmony of Stars, we need unconventional solutions immediately, the Admiral stated without preamble. Our best military minds have been outmaneuvered at every turn. The enemy appears to have studied our tactics extensively and prepared counters for every standard Alliance strategy. The faculty exchanged meaningful glances. Everyone knew what the Admiral was really asking, even if he could not say it directly. The Alliance needed someone who could think outside traditional military doctrine, someone whose approach to warfare might confuse and surprise an enemy that had mastered conventional tactics. They needed Jake Morrison. Commander Zixtal felt his skin cycle through several colors as he contemplated the implications. Recommending an untested human student for an active military advisory role would be unprecedented and potentially disastrous. But the Alliance was facing defeat through conventional means, and desperate situations sometimes required desperate measures. Admiral, we have a student here whose strategic approaches have been quite successful in simulation, Zixtal said carefully. His methods are unconventional, but his results have been consistently impressive. I do not care if your student is a sentient gas cloud as long as he can find solutions that work, Admiral Korthnax replied grimly. Patch him through immediately. Jake was awakened from sleep and brought to the command center still wearing his Academy sleep clothes and his ever-present baseball cap. He looked around at the assembled alien faculty and the holographic Admiral with obvious curiosity, rather than the appropriate gravity for a military crisis. So what's the situation? Jake asked as he studied the tactical displays showing 3 active war zones. Looks like someone's running a pretty effective multi-front offensive strategy. Admiral Korthnax's expression showed surprise at the humans. Casual tone, but he quickly began explaining the strategic situation. The hegemony forces had achieved simultaneous breakthroughs on all 3 worlds using tactics that perfectly countered Alliance defensive doctrine. Jake listened while munching on a protein bar someone had given him, occasionally asking questions that seemed oddly specific to the alien commanders. He wanted to know about enemy supply lines, communication delays between their forces, and what he called respawn timers for reinforcements. Okay, so they're basically surging all three objectives at once, which means they're spreading there. Force is thin, Jake said after studying the data for several minutes. And they're hard countering your standard defensive builds, which tells me someone's been studying your playbook pretty carefully. You need to completely change the meta. The silence that followed Jake's assessment stretched uncomfortably long. Admiral Korthnax stared at the human student with a mixture of confusion and desperation. Could you explain that in standard military terminology? The Admiral asked finally. Sure. They're overwhelming you with mass-coordinated attacks because they know exactly how you're going to respond to each threat. Your commanders are following predictable patterns, so the enemy can prepare counters in advance. You need to do something completely different that they won't expect. Jake moved to the tactical display and began highlighting different areas with his finger. See, they've committed huge forces to taking these three systems, but that means their home territory is probably underdefended, and their supply lines are stretched really thin trying to maintain offensive operations across such a wide front. You suggest abandoning the three worlds under attack? Professor Yelendra asked, with horror. Temporarily, yeah. Let them take the objectives while you hit their home base and cut their supply routes. It's a basic bait-and-switch strategy. They think they're winning because they're accomplishing their stated goals, but you're actually putting them in a losing position. Admiral Korthnax studied Jake's proposed strategy with growing interest. The plan was risky and violated several principles of Alliance military doctrine, but it offered genuine possibilities for turning the tide of battle. This approach requires abandoning civilian populations to enemy occupation, the Admiral pointed out. Only for a few weeks, Jake replied confidently. They can't actually harm the civilians without turning neutral systems against them. And once their supply situation collapses, they'll have to withdraw from the occupied territories to defend their core worlds. It's like forcing them to choose between keeping their captured territory and protecting their own home base. The discussion that followed became one of the most important strategic conferences in galactic history. Jake explained his analysis using terms that the alien commanders struggled to understand, but gradually learned to interpret. He treated the three-front war like a complex strategy game, where victory required thinking several moves ahead of the opponent. The key thing is that they've committed to a strategy that can't adapt quickly, Jake continued. They've put all their mobile forces into offensive operations, which means they can't respond effectively to counterattacks. It's like they've gone all in on an early game rush strategy, but you can beat that by surviving the initial assault and then hitting them during their resource recovery phase. Admiral Korthnax made the decision that would change the course of the war. Despite the risks and the protests from traditional military advisors, he authorized implementation of Jake's unconventional strategy. The human student was given access to Alliance communication networks and real-time tactical data from all three fronts. Jake approached the coordination of multiple fleet groups and planetary defense forces like he was managing a massive multiplayer strategy game, using terminology that his alien colleagues struggled to follow but gradually learned to translate. Alpha. Team. You're the main strike force hitting their home systems, Jake explained to confused fleet commanders over secure channels. Bravo and Charlie teams are running interference and cutting supply routes. Think of it like a coordinated raid where everyone has specific objectives that support the overall mission. As Jake's plan went into effect, the hegemony forces found themselves fighting a completely different kind of war than they had prepared for. Instead of the predictable Alliance defensive patterns they had studied, they faced rapid strikes against their core territories and systematic destruction of their logistics networks. The alien commanders, who had spent centuries learning traditional military doctrine, watched in amazement as a human student coordinated the most complex military operation in recent Galactic history using casual language and gaming analogies. Delta Squad, you need to maintain map control around those resource nodes. Jake told a group of Corthic fighter pilots. Don't let them re-establish supply runs, but don't overcommit to fights you can't win cleanly. Within days, the hegemony's seemingly unstoppable offensive began to falter as their extended supply lines came under constant attack and their home territories faced serious threats. The enemy commanders, who had prepared for conventional alliance responses, found themselves completely unprepared for Jake's gaming-inspired approach to warfare. The tide of battle was turning, but the most critical phase of the conflict was still to come. The war room aboard Harmony of Stars had become the unofficial command center for the most unconventional military campaign in galactic history. Jake Morrison sat at the central console, wearing his wrinkled academy uniform and baseball cap, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements across dozens of star systems. Admiral Korthnax watched from his flagship as the human student coordinated strike teams with the casual efficiency of someone playing a familiar game. Jake's terminology had become so common among the Alliance forces that veteran commanders were learning to speak in gaming references just to communicate effectively with their units. Echo Team, you're doing great on resource denial, Jake said into his headset while monitoring 6 different tactical displays simultaneously. Keep pressuring their mining operations, but don't get baited into extended fights. We want to keep them guessing about our main objectives. 3 weeks into Jake's strategy implementation, the hegemony found themselves fighting on 6 fronts instead of 3. Their initial overwhelming attacks had succeeded in capturing the targeted Alliance worlds, but the cost of holding those territories while defending their home systems was proving unsustainable. Commander Zixtal stood behind Jake, his crystalline skin shifting through fascinated purple hues as he watched the human manage military operations that would normally require entire staff departments. The student treated each engagement like an interesting puzzle to be solved, rather than a life-or-death struggle involving thousands of sentient beings. Foxtrot Squadron, perfect timing on that supply raid, Jake continued with obvious satisfaction. You caught them right in the middle of a resource transfer. Now pull back before their escort ships arrive. No point fighting fair when you can fight smart. The hegemony commanders were discovering that their carefully planned invasion had become a strategic nightmare. Every time they adapted to Alliance tactics, Jake would shift to completely different approaches that exploited new weaknesses in their extended positions. Professor Yelandra monitored casualty reports with amazement. Despite the complex multi-front warfare, total losses remained lower than typical single-engagement battles using conventional Alliance strategies. Jake's gaming approach emphasized efficiency and objective completion over prolonged combat encounters. Golf Team, excellent work on that feint operation, Jake said with genuine enthusiasm. They committed their mobile reserves exactly like we predicted. Now they're stuck defending territory they can't actually hold while we control all the strategic resources they need. Lisa Parker had joined the command center as Jake's strategic advisor, helping translate his gaming terminology for the alien officers who were still struggling with concepts like map control and resource management. Her presence allowed Jake to explain his strategies using familiar references while she provided more traditional military explanations for the confused faculty. The enemy is caught in what we call a macroeconomic trap, Lisa explained to Admiral Korthnax. They're spending more resources maintaining their captured territories than those territories provide in strategic value. Meanwhile, we're denying them access to the resource nodes they need to sustain their war effort. Resource nodes? The Admiral asked, though he was beginning to understand the human strategic vocabulary. Critical supply centers, manufacturing facilities, and fuel depots, Lisa translated. By controlling these locations, We force the enemy to make increasingly difficult choices about where to commit their remaining forces. The decisive moment came when Hegemony High Command faced exactly the choice Jake had predicted weeks earlier. Their forces were spread across too many objectives to defend effectively, while their supply situation deteriorated daily under constant Alliance harassment. Hotel team reports enemy fleet movements toward their home systems, announced Rex, who had volunteered to help coordinate communications. The Korthik student had become fascinated by human strategic methods and was proving surprisingly good at interpreting Jake's rapid-fire tactical adjustments. Jake studied the incoming data with the focused attention of a player approaching a crucial endgame scenario. Perfect. They're finally making the choice we've been forcing on them. They can either keep holding our territory and lose their home base, or abandon their captured objectives to defend what really matters to them. And either choice leads to their strategic defeat, Admiral Korthnax observed with growing appreciation for the human approach. Exactly. It's like setting up a chess fork, but with entire fleets instead of pieces. No matter what they choose, they lose something important. The hegemony chose to defend their core territories, beginning a massive withdrawal from the 3 Alliance worlds they had captured at such great cost. But Jake had anticipated this decision and positioned Alliance forces to harass the retreating fleets while simultaneously launching attacks on hegemony border systems that had been left undefended. India Squadron, those transports are pulling back exactly like we predicted, Jake coordinated with obvious excitement. Hit their rear guard formations, but don't pursue too aggressively. We want them to retreat in good order so they don't get desperate and do something unpredictable. Professor Quellix watched the strategic displays with ancient wisdom gleaming in his multifaceted eyes. The human student has achieved something remarkable. He has made warfare predictable by forcing the enemy into positions where they're optimal. Choices serve his strategic goals. The final phase of the campaign unfolded with mechanical precision as hegemony forces found themselves reacting to Alliance initiatives rather than pursuing their own objectives. Jake's gaming-inspired approach had transformed a desperate defensive situation into a controlled offensive campaign that steadily eroded enemy capabilities. Juliet team, excellent interdiction work. Jake praised another successful supply raid. Their logistics network is basically broken now. Even if they wanted to launch another offensive, they don't have the resources to sustain it. 2 months after the hegemony's initial attacks, their invasion force had been completely neutralized. The 3 Alliance worlds were liberated with minimal infrastructure damage, and hegemony military capabilities had been reduced to purely defensive operations within their own territory. Admiral Korthnax arrived at Harmony of Stars in person to witness the conclusion of the most successful Alliance military campaign in decades. He found Jake in the Academy cafeteria, celebrating with other students and looking completely relaxed despite having just coordinated the defeat of the galaxy's most dangerous military threat. Student Morrison, the Admiral said formally, the Alliance owes you a debt that cannot be easily repaid. Your strategic innovations have not only saved 3 worlds, but demonstrated capabilities that will reshape military thinking throughout the galaxy. Jake grinned and gestured to an empty chair. Just doing what made sense, Admiral. The whole thing was basically a really complex strategy game with some interesting victory conditions. Want to grab some food, and I can walk you through the key decision points. The casual invitation from a student to one of the galaxy's highest ranking military officers would have been scandalous under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances, and Admiral Korthnax found himself genuinely curious about Jake's perspective on the campaign they had just completed. Commander. Zixtal approached the table with his skin displaying the deep blue colors of profound respect. Student Morrison, the Academy Board has authorized me to offer you a permanent position as Strategic Innovation Advisor. Your methods have proven their worth beyond any doubt. That sounds awesome, Jake replied enthusiastically. But I have one condition. I want to set up an exchange program to bring more human students here. You guys have amazing facilities and incredible tactical scenarios, but you're missing out on some really effective approaches to strategic thinking. More humans like you? Professor Yolandra asked, her ethereal form brightening with curiosity. Oh, way better than me, Jake said with complete sincerity. I'm just okay at real-time strategy games. You should see what the people who are really good at grand strategy or tactical shooters could do with scenarios like these. Plus, there are specialists in different types of gaming who could probably revolutionize specific aspects of military training. The proposal that followed would transform military education throughout the galaxy. Jake outlined plans for integrating human gaming culture with traditional Alliance military doctrine, creating hybrid approaches that combine the best aspects of both systems. The key insight is that you guys have been treating warfare like a sacred ritual instead of a problem to be solved efficiently, Jake explained as he sketched diagrams on napkins. Humans figured out a long time ago that if you want to get really good at something, you should make it fun. When people enjoy practicing strategic thinking, they get much better at it much faster. 6 months later, Harmony of Stars had become the most sought-after military academy in known space. Human exchange students worked alongside alien cadets in programs that combined traditional military wisdom with innovative gaming approaches to strategic education. Jake stood in front of a classroom full of eager students from dozens of species. A whiteboard covered with terminology that would have been incomprehensible to a military educator.